A very common question that I see on here is why does my airbrush spray or spit paint when I don't pull back on the trigger? So this week I wanted to make a short video right to the point to address this. So let's say you just bought a brand new airbrush and you're ready to paint. The airbrush is loaded with the exact color that you want and your painting surface is clean. You press down on the airbrush trigger for air and then this happens. It spits the paint. This is a very common problem with new airbrush painters, and the good news is that it's one of the easiest things to fix. This all has to do with a common airbrush handling mistake that nearly all of us make when just starting out. So I just started this portrait and here I'm painting in some skin texture. I must be starting and stopping the paint hundreds of times while I'm doing this. But while I'm painting, I never ever stop the air while I'm spraying paint. We'll take a few seconds here to listen to this while I continually start and stop the paint over and over again. I'll go quiet here. So while I'm painting in this skin texture here, I'm starting and stopping the paint continually, just on and off over and over again. But as you just heard, I'm always holding down the airbrush trigger to spray air. And this is the beautiful thing about a double action airbrush. You get full 100% control of your paint, something that's just impossible with a single action airbrush or a spray can. Up close, this is what it looks like. I press down for air and then I just pull back to spray some paint. As I pull back on the airbrush trigger, it retracts the needle, which sprays more paint. When I want to stop, the first thing I do is move the trigger fully forward so that the paint is no longer spraying. And only then do I release the trigger and stop the air. If you start and stop the air while the trigger is back, like what I'm showing here, paint is going to collect at the very end of the needle tip. Then the next time that you press down for air, even without pulling back on the trigger, that paint that's sitting on the end of the needle tip is going to get forced forward onto whatever it is that you're aiming your airbrush at. In other words, it's going to spit the paint. Here I'm retracting the needle back and forth without spraying any air, and you can see just how much paint built up on that needle tip. And if I don't clean this off before I start spraying, that's going to shoot right out of the front of the airbrush. So that's one of the major advantages among many with a double action airbrush. Just remember, press down first so that the air is on. That's action number 1. Then pull back on the trigger for the paint. That's action 2. And finally, only stop the air once the trigger is fully forward again. This also helps a ton with tip dry. If you notice that you're getting a lot of dried paint on the end of your needle, it could be because you're releasing the air when the trigger is in the back position, leading to more paint on the tip. And one final thing that can help, and that I always recommend, is to just tighten down this trigger spring tension screw at the back of the airbrush. A few turns to the right or clockwise will make the trigger feel a bit tighter, but this creates a much better seal between the front of the nozzle and the end of the needle. And then I slide the needle back into the airbrush until I feel it make contact with the nozzle using no pressure at all. You never want to apply any force on the needle because you could easily damage that nozzle. So that's it. I do hope that this quick tip was helpful for any of you guys just starting out. Thanks for watching. I'll be back here next week and we'll get back to some painting.